This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
Since the Russian invasion into Ukraine, one thing that's been on a lot of people's minds, especially the Europeans, is energy. Back in 2010, Israel had somewhat of an energy revolution. From a country that relied almost exclusively on imported energy, Israel suddenly became energy rich, along with certain corporations. Some might even say they became filthy rich. The discovery of the Tamar, Leviathan, Karish and Tanin gas fields under the Mediterranean Sea was no less than striking flammable gold. And it indeed sparked a fiery debate across Israel. Delek, Noble, and a relatively small Israeli company called Ratio were the main ones responsible for finding and extracting the gas. But should they retain the rights to profit from it? Today, we're joined by one of the key figures in this debate, Professor David Gilo, former Director General of the Israeli Antitrust Authority. Professor Gilo received his doctoral degree from Harvard Law. He teaches at Tel Aviv University, and he's won countless awards. We are thrilled to be joined today by Professor David Gilo to talk about Israel's natural resources and monopoly power. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm going to fix my microphone here because I feel like the hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah. Take it up.
I will.
With this one. Exactly. So, looking at the gas prices now in the world, it seems like the state won, right, against the gas monopolies, because in the end you quit because of the arrangement that was made, if I remember correctly. The whole gas story is extremely complex. You can do a podcast of like 4 hours about it. But to sum it up, you quit, but eventually they got to some sort of an agreement. They compromised somehow, and there were a lot of critics. But eventually now, when you look at the gas prices, Israel is one of the cheapest, has the cheapest gas in the world. So can we say that everyone won?
I don't think that comparing prices between the gas prices in Israel and in other places in the world, that's the correct comparison. You have to see how much competition we could have had if the government would be stronger in bringing more competition to the market versus the situation now. And the situation now is that we have less competition than we could have had. So what you should ask is, could the prices have been even lower than now? And I think they could have.
But what happened with the gas, correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially the state didn't have faith. Nobody ever thought we would have natural resources. So they gave the licenses to look for gas. They gave it like candies, basically, because the cost of the search was extremely high. The risk was infinite, and the chances were very, very slim. But then after Yitzhak Tshuva, I think, put a lot of money, he struck gold. And then in retrospect, the state said, 1 minute, now let's fix the terms, although they already signed the deal with him. So, and then they changed their mind and defiled the deal. Is that what happened, or am I messing it up?
No, I think you're confusing the issue with taxes. With the competition issue.
Okay.
With taxes, there was a claim that there's a retroactive aspect to what the government did. I'm not a tax expert. It wasn't my area.
Okay.
But with respect to competition, what happened is that, as you said, they controlled certain gas fields, Tamar and Karish Tanin. And then they entered an agreement with the ratio to enter what is now Leviathan. And in our view, they should have come to us for prior approval, because in Israel, such agreements are considered restrictive agreements, restraints of trade that require prior approval. And they didn't do so. So this was a legal violation that they should have taken account of.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, we weren't approaching them retroactively. We just exposed a violation and tried to gain a remedy that would restore competition. And like I said, had there been competition, for example, between Tamar and Leviathan, like I was striving for, then prices would be much lower than they are now in a very important market that affects prices of electricity and then the prices of all products produced through electricity. It could have been lower. That's what antitrust people do. Antitrust regulators, they strive for more competition in order to get a more competitive outcome. It's not that they strive for an optimal price and then they're satisfied once the price reaches a certain threshold.
Mm-hmm.
They want, if it's possible to gain more competition by exposing a violation, then that's what we do.
Is there a situation in which you believe that someone can corner the market or a market and function within a healthy economy and provide a service in a way that's okay? Or any corporation or any entity that corners a specific market needs to be broken up? Not corners, but actually controls.
Monopolize.
Yeah.
Well, usually a monopoly produces an inefficient outcome because it's going to charge a monopoly price, and that's going to cause the price to be above what is optimal from a welfare perspective, especially from an antitrust point of view that strives to maximize consumer welfare. So this is bad for consumers. You might say, we want to give this monopolist incentives to invest, ex ante, etc.
To excel.
So sometimes we need, in order to get that, to stimulate investment, we need to provide a legal monopoly. That's what happens sometimes with patents,
Mm-hmm.
With pharmaceuticals, etc. We give them sort of a monopoly, or at least the right to exclude others by law, because we think this will stimulate investment. But otherwise, the premise is that we want competition, because competition brings prices closer to what is optimal from a welfare perspective.
If we go back to the gas story, to me there's something absurd about it, because the state gave the licenses, right? The resource is very, very limited of gas search licenses in our small piece of the Mediterranean, okay? So no matter what would be the outcome, you would never have real competition, because there isn't really a free market here for everyone. It is what you call competition in this story is in fact fake competition, puppeted from above by the state. So it's just a game. It's not real free market. So what's the worth of this word competition if we use it in those circumstances?
I disagree with that, because in this case, for example, if Noble and Delek would not engage in the restrictive agreement with Ratio,
mm-hmm.
then presumably somebody else would have developed Leviathan, and then we would have competition between Tamar and Leviathan. That would be perfectly natural. I think that's what the legislation that privatized this market had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
It wanted licenses to be spread around as many actors as possible. And then I think what you're implying is that the chances that all of them will find gas are very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
But here we have an example where we had a big field, both in Leviathan and in Tamar.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be lucky enough to have a duopoly of two giants competing with each other over the Israeli consumer.
Exactly, but it's not a free market, right? When you say privatized, if it were indeed privatized, the state would take its ends out of it. The minute you try to, control the market in a centralized way like this, like telling the company, no, it's privatized, but you don't buy him and you don't make a deal with him, then is it really privatized?
I think you're confusing between free competition and laissez-faire.
Okay.
You're saying just let them do whatever they want and the government will not interfere. There is such a view in the world, but it's not common. Any antitrust authority in any country, including the US before Lina Khan, would say, okay, you can do whatever you want, but there are rules. And if you try to gain control of your rival or engage in an agreement with your rival or potential rival, this might be a violation. This is the way all over the world. So there is some degree of intervention in the market in order to ensure that competition is free competition. And then the premise is that the competition will do the job. That's where the freedom kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, most of the jurisdictions are not laissez-faire, do whatever you want, merge, engage in collusion. That's not the way antitrust law is
Why did Ratio
framed.
want to sell to...
Well, usually you want to sell to a competitor because the competitor is offering you a good price,
Mm-hmm.
because together you're going to make more money, precisely because of elimination of competition. So the elimination of competition makes it worthwhile for both parties to engage in this. There might also be synergies. I'm not saying that there aren't.
But
Sometimes it's efficient to merge. But one of the motivations of a merger among potential competitors is precisely eliminating competition. So that's good for them, but it's bad for consumers.
if we talk about what the market is, though, the market is energy, right? And they didn't eliminate competition altogether. I mean, there was a deal prior to this with Egypt, right, to acquire natural gas. Don't we have a deal with Azerbaijan, I think, or we used to.
There are other gas, not only gas.
And there's not only ways. No, but I think with Azerbaijan it's petroleum or oil. I'm not sure, but there's a bunch of different ways. I mean, Israel right before Tamar and Leviathan and all them were importing energy, so it's obviously not necessarily as efficient. But if this monopoly gets out of hand, they don't actually control 100% of the market. If we keep limiting the market, and I guess that's also a question I have, is like, how do you define a market that you can monopolize, right? Because you can constantly shift the borders of it and then monopolize just what I own. So, I mean, did they really monopolize the energy market in Israel?
Well, yes, because the energy market is, you can't define such a broad market because you define a market from the point of view of the consumer. The consumer here is electricity plants that need the natural gas in order to produce electricity. And for them, at least at the time, buying another kind of fuel was out of the question because it was much more expensive, it's less clean from an environmental point of view, etc. Buying natural gas from another source is a possibility, but the gas from Egypt stopped right before
in the revolution
this issue.
They blew up
But even
pipes.
if we had gas from Egypt, that's only one more rival. So if you have a merger between two major competitors and they have one rival, I don't know an antitrust authority that would approve of that. But here we didn't even have Egypt as a supplier. So it is a merger to monopoly.
But So the pipeline with Egypt blew up the second we found natural gas, and
it was very close in time. So by the time that we knew that we had Leviathan and Tamar in the same hands, we didn't really have Egyptian gas as an option. But I'm saying, even if we had, it's only one more rival. It's a very concentrated market.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a market with 3 firms and 2 of them merge, it's usually going to be blocked.
When you gave the licenses, or the state gave the licenses, they signed the contract, right? The state signed the contract with Tshuva, the investor, basically, right? Or am I?
Well, there are all kinds of
contract.
regulators in this market. So there's one regulator, the Department of Energy, that grants the licenses.
Yes.
I think this is what you mean when you say the government signed with them.
Right. Like I'm asking about.
But there's another regulator, the Antitrust Authority, that also has jurisdiction over this market.
But in retrospect,
so the Department of Energy cares about, safety. Let there be gas. I want there to be gas. It doesn't really care about competition and doesn't have the authority or expertise to deal with competition. So you have another regulator, the Antitrust Authority, that its job is to make sure that there's competition. So these sort of transactions are under the jurisdiction of both regulators. So you're saying one of them said, okay, this is fine with me, but this is subject to the approval also of the other regulator.
At any point, you can just enter the house and say, "You stop this now." Like,
it's better to stop it at the beginning. So one of the issues,
when they signed this contract, didn't you?
One of the issues here is that when they signed this contract and when they entered Leviathan, I wasn't there. The former director general was there, and she didn't approach them to say this is a violation.
Nobody thought.
One of their claims was, it was in the papers. You knew about it and you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So we assumed it's okay.
Yeah.
But that's not something that an antitrust violator can claim. Because at least in Israel at the time, this is a sort of violation that's subject to prior approval. So the burden is on the parties to come to the regulator and say, listen, I did this, tell me what to do. And in fact, in previous deals that they made, they came to the director general that was in position at the time. And she told them, listen, you can drill in both fields, but if you find gas in both, you need to sell one of them. So they said, okay, so we don't want this deal. But then when they entered Leviathan, they said, okay, let's not ask. And indeed, it worked. She didn't approach them. They went ahead with it, found gas in both. But then I came and said this was a violation. So in a sense, there is a sense here of somebody coming at you retroactively. But in this legal environment, it's your problem as a violator, because you took the risk. The risk is on you that you didn't approach the regulator like you should have.
So if I understand correctly, the issue that the Antitrust Authority had with Delek and Noble specifically was not Tamar and the prior fields that they had found and excavated. It was the acquisition and merger of the Leviathan field, which made them basically control all the natural gas resources in Israel.
Right.
And what was the deal that was on the table that made you kind of step away, and what would you have wanted the deal to look like? What would have kind of made you happy?
So that's exactly right. So I thought the best remedy to competition would be to sell out Tamar. because Tamar was the developed field, which was the most easy to sell, because it's already producing gas. Had they sold Tamar to somebody else, we would have a duopoly. Tamar in the hands of one entity and Leviathan in the hands of another, and then I would be satisfied. Or something analogous to that, like, for example, selling all of the Israeli gas of Tamar to somebody else. So one of the options was...
One for import, one for export.
Yeah, let's split the export from the import. We, as Israeli consumers, don't care about the export. So you can keep doing the export, even though you're in Leviathan. But sell all of the rights to the Israeli
but at what price?
Gas to somebody else. Well, because whatever the market can bear. You can put it on a bid.
Once you're forcing him to sell, I mean, the guy who's buying from him knows that you told him you've got to sell. If I was buying from him, I'd be like, buddy,
but
you don't have any bargaining power here, right?
There could be several such guys that are competing over it. So somebody like this can get a good deal. Not that it's my problem as a regulator. As a regulator, I think about the Israeli consumer, and whatever he's going to get for the asset, that's fine with me. But in reality, because it's a very valuable asset, presumably there would be competition over it, and then they would get a good price for it.
But to me, it all comes down to, and it has to do also with the next topic I want to talk about, which is other markets in Israel. But no matter how you look at it, the state created this problem. The state failed to set the rules straight.
How did it fail?
Because it didn't give them, it didn't sign with them an actual agreement saying these are the rules of the license. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's in the antitrust law. It's like you would say a thief would say to the police, "Listen, you didn't told me I'm not allowed to steal."
Okay, if that's the law, so what was the debate about then? Why did you quit?
Well, like you probably know, there's a difference between what's right and what's happening in reality. So what happened in reality is that the government didn't want to argue with the companies too much and didn't want to enter a clash with the companies because of the threat of the companies that if they do so, they won't develop Leviathan, and then Israel will suffer, etc. So what they did is use a section in the Israeli Antitrust law that says that the Minister of Economy can bypass the Director General if it's an issue of foreign relations or social security.
Yeah.
And that's what they said they're going to do, and that's why I quit.
I see. Wow. So how do you look at this in retrospect?
Well, it was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Does the market today satisfy you, the gas market, when you look at it?
Like I said at the beginning, it could have been better.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it could have been worse.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing that there is gas. Many of the proponents of this agreement with the government say, look how great it is today. But I need to remind them that one of the reasons that there is some competition is also thanks to our intervention. Mm-hmm. If we wouldn't intervene at the time, we would have a single firm controlling all fields. The only reason that they were obliged to give up some of the fields, like Karish and Tanin, that did give certain discounts.
That who controls it today?
It's Energian, a Greek corporation. And we have maybe some competitive tension between Leviathan and Tamar because the ownership isn't identical.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is
between Delek and Noble.
It's not what I wanted. It's less than the competition that we could have had.
But
it's thanks to our intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Had we not intervened, this also wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at the Israeli market, I feel I want to I mean, maybe we'll circle back to gas at the end, but I wanna kind of step into the broader lens of monopolization and free markets. And when I look at the Israeli market, I feel like a lot of the times the places that really perturb me the most are the places where monopolization or some form of protection, right? I guess monopolization is a protection from market forces because I own the entire market, so I can do whatever I want. And so some form of protection is actually handed to the players by the government. You know, if you look at the
food,
a lot of the food markets, eggs and milk, and even the agricultural market in Israel, to imported goods like electronics, from electronics all the way to vehicles, which in Israel are double the price because the government tells you, you know, you have to pay 200 and something % on a car that would cost you otherwise. You know, I'd own a Tesla if I wasn't living in Israel. but that's what bothers me the most. It doesn't seem to me like the places that are free to operate are really choking me financially.
Well, I think if I understood correctly, what you're saying is that the government has to do a lot with the fact that we have monopolies and concentrated markets and lack of competition. And it's true. But I think the government has gone a long way to get away from this in many aspects, especially recently. So, you know, this government that's now ending its term...
Short tenure.
Yeah. Did a few things that previous governments did not have the nerve or ability or political ability to do, like agriculture, for example. You know, to enable import of agricultural products into Israel, to reduce barriers to import of such products. So this is something that would amend some of the market failures that caused by the government at the time because of some, you know, farmers' lobby that sort of arranged for the farmers to be insulated from competition.
Yeah.
They're allowed to fix prices with each other, and also they're protected almost completely from import.
So as a proponent of competition, because, you know, I think we disagree on the value of antitrust, but your belief is that there should be more competition. We might disagree, I think, on the methodology, but ultimately you claim to want more competition. So as someone who wants more competition, do you hope that Israel would reduce, for example, the customs on
everything,
or on a large part of the products that are imported, the Moetzet Alul v'Achalav, like, do you want to see the breakup of these things?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
that was a short answer.
Yeah.
No, but
okay. One that makes me happy.
But okay,
at least we agree about something.
No, but yeah, for sure. But you were there. Like, if I were in your job, you know, I would go on a fight against Machon Atkanim, the, what's their name in English? I don't know even. Yeah, the standardization department of the institute. Yeah, I would you know, I would go to war against the Ministry of Health, which doesn't allow me and Eitan. If tomorrow me and Eitan we want to import cheeses from Italy, we can't do it. We just can't.
Which, by the way, is the thing that bothers Noor the most.
Of course.
Cheeses from Italy specifically.
Or the fact that Aryeh Deri legislated a law that says that you can only import pork meat if it's kosher. Okay, you know this story?
No.
It's a true story. Google it later.
Sounds like an empty set.
So, okay, you know, so those are huge things that with all due respect to the gas, which, okay, I get it, it's important, but those are such basic things. So did you do anything about those things?
Sure. We argued with the government all the time in order to get more competition, and we got some. We managed to narrow down the exemption for farmers. At the time, the exemption was for farmers and also the wholesalers that bought from the farmers. Both of these could do cartels and price fixing as much as they wanted. So we managed to eliminate the cartel between the wholesalers, for example. We fought the Ministry of Health on several occasions. And sometimes with success, small successes, one after the other.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, these are political issues that the politicians need to resolve. So the antitrust agency is there to advocate to the politicians. Listen, the best thing is to do this. But then the politician needs to listen. I think the most...
But you just said there's a law. There's a law that gives you power, and I read on the internet you took more power than others did. Like you interpreted the law even more severely.
But you can't apply antitrust law to the government. You can just try to convince them. Because when the Minister of Health blocks import, for example, or the Minister of Religion, etc., it's not a violation. It's not an antitrust violation because he's doing it by law.
It's a contradiction
by his jurisdiction.
In law, in a sense.
You cannot enforce antitrust law against a government official that's doing something that he's authorized to do. You can only try to convince him. So you come to the Knesset, you come to the committees, and
you lobby.
I guess that's the problem that I think we have with antitrust is that it proposes to promote competition, but really, generally, it's from the government. So where is it directed? It's directed at the consumer.
At the corporations.
At the corporations, but it's directed at the citizens, meaning it's directed at people who are supposed to operate within the free market. It's not directed at shattering, issues and economic protection that's being given by the government.
Because in any democratic, environment, then you have these, parliament members that legislate laws, and they authorize all kinds of regulators and ministers to do all kinds of things. You can't let one of the regulators, like the Antitrust Authority, attack what the parliament has done in other areas. Because, there's sort of a rule of law. What you're trying to imply, I think, is to put antitrust law above
the
other laws, sort of a constitution.
Yeah.
And that's not the case in any... I would be happy, to do that, but
I'm saying
it's not the case in any jurisdiction.
What I'm saying is it feels to me like we're trying to fix a leak with Band-Aids, like a huge gaping hole in a main pipeline with a bunch of Band-Aids. And really, to me, it seems like the problem in the Israeli economy is more the protections that the government hands down to certain corporations or certain industries or markets, and less the monopolization. And so I would prefer that the energy or the resources that go into funding or operating an antitrust authority would go into actually breaking the real trusts, doing the real trust busting, which I feel like is happening within the government.
Which is the government itself, but that's putting the antitrust authority above the government, and that's problematic. So I think it doesn't make regulation of corporations redundant, because that's important too. You can't say because a lot of the problem is the government, we should let the corporations do whatever they want. Because then, for sure, they're going to fix prices, monopolize, merge, etc. So all of what's privatized is going to be monopoly prices, and then you wouldn't achieve.
But here's the problem.
Anything.
I'll try. It's a big issue, but here that's exactly the point. But by having this antitrust office. What do? The politician? They send you come, you're very ambitious, you go against the banks, and you go against, Osem and all those big companies.
Tnuva, Coca-Cola.
Yeah, Tnuva, Coca-Cola, okay? Now, those are companies for profit, okay? Yes, they have lobbies, but they didn't legislate. They're not responsible for the laws, right? Who's responsible? The politicians are responsible. You cannot blame the banks for the regulatory situation in Israel. In the end, it's only the responsibility of the politicians.
But their responsibility is not to break the law. So if they break the law, it's my job to enforce the law.
Yes, but there are also a lot of vague cases, and it is their job to want to earn as much money as they want. And the moment...
No, not as much money as they want, subject to the law. So what you're forgetting here is the rule of law. So you have corporations doing whatever they want, subject to all kinds of rules, but like you're not allowed to kill, you're not allowed to deal drugs, and you're not allowed to fix prices with your competitor.
But many of those laws are come to replace a free market, because many of those problems would have been maybe solved if you had real competition. So what the state does, it creates a monopolized market. Then it says here there's this anti-regulatory system. They will make sure the companies don't profit too much. And here there are those laws that will make sure that instead of just, it's a whole bagel and mind-boggler instead of just, having a free market that would solve many of those problems.
I agree with you completely. So if the government creates monopolies, that's a problem. And then we have to do whatever we can to prevent that. We can do it in the ballot, not elect a government that did this. We can do it by advocacy, trying to convince politicians to explain to the public why this is a mistake. But this doesn't mean that when the government creates a competitive market, that is, it allows free entry, it doesn't create a monopoly, it doesn't block competition itself. And then come the firms and block competition.
For example?
The most extreme case is price fixing. Two competitors in your free market meet together and say, okay, let's charge more from consumers because we're going to make more money. Is this a violation or not? And antitrust law says, yes, this is a violation and you're going to go to jail if you do it. So we are for free markets, but the intervention here in the market is we don't allow the firms to harm competition.
But would this really happen in a free market?
Yes, of course it would happen. Because if you want to make more money and you're allowed to do it, you go to your rival, you say, listen, why compete? We're going to make much more money if we don't compete. So let's agree to charge a price of 3 times what we're charging now.
But then the third guy...
I think that...
The third guy might not be able to enter the market because even if it's free entry and it's not blocked by regulation, it's not always profitable to be the third player or the fourth player. There are barriers to entry. Sometimes these barriers to entry are created by the incumbents themselves, and this is a violation too sometimes. So you have to take account of the fact that competition is never perfect. Had competition been perfect, we wouldn't have a problem. But when we have competition, it's never perfect because there's only so much room to enter. It's not profitable for the 4th or 5th company to enter, even if the government doesn't do anything to block it. And then you have to make sure that the 3, 4, 5 incumbents don't do something to harm competition.
I think that there's something, though, that undermines or doesn't have faith in the human spirit or ingenuity. When you think about corporations price fixing, meaning, I first of all wonder if it happens as often as you describe, or would happen as often as you describe if markets were totally free. And even if it did happen, I ask myself, is it more harmful that the government step in and start regulating and start saying you're not allowed to do this or you're allowed to do that because it's an overreach of power? Or is it more harmful that they would have a fixed price for a certain amount of time until someone came along and either competed well enough to break it up, or B, came up with an alternative out of human ingenuity? Said, you know what, natural gas. Maybe that's exactly, by the way, I'm not a huge proponent of, I love green energy if it existed tomorrow, but I'm not someone who advocates, subsidizing. But maybe that's exactly what the green energy market needs. Like, to kind of like a a kid needs to be given, independence and let out, and you can't keep giving him money, otherwise he's going to grow dependent on his parents. They need to compete for real with the fossil fuel market, and then they'll find a way to innovate.
It's a matter of ideology. I'm certain that other people might feel like you and just say this intervention is too costly. But I'm of the view that some intervention is needed, because if it's going to be allowed to harm competition, you can be sure that everybody's going to do so, because you always make more money without competition.
Absolutely.
And then the premise is that there will be no competition, and I'm certain that this is worse than having some regulation.
I guess it's a question of where you draw the lines of fair game, right? Because we all agree that you can't kill the other guy.
Right.
I do agree that a corporation at its core, I do agree that the corporation at its core is always asking itself, how do we stifle the competitor?
Sure.
You look at competitors, you say competitors are good because maybe they are proof that there's a market, but you're not happy that they're there. You wish they weren't, and that you own the entire market.
Which is why you're not incentivized to reach an agreement with them to fix prices.
Yeah, but given that they are there and they're there to stay, you prefer cooperating with them.
Not fix prices,
because otherwise you have this prisoner's dilemma where you cut prices and then he cuts prices.
But you don't factor in so many things. Like if I don't know, if two companies, let's say, I don't know which two companies, like Amazon and Best Buy, okay? Let's say they did it, okay?
Amazon and Best Buy what?
Fixed prices.
No, but it's fixed prices, I think, is less of it's mergers, right? Amazon would just say, we don't like the fact that there's a competition, we'll buy you.
We'll buy you, okay. Then so what? So there would be a huge, but then tomorrow would be, first of all, so many small vendors. And I don't know, I don't see, as Eitan said, to me, the risk, we saw it just now. There was a story here in Israel about they want to charge heads of big supermarkets for, I don't know, they spoke on the phone or something like that. What's your take on that story, for example?
You mean public statements?
Yeah, they were interviewed, remember, a few months ago. They were interviewed about prices, and they were asked about prices, and they said some things about prices. And now the state, I think it's someone who sits in your position, right? I don't remember his name now.
Michal Cohen?
Michal Cohen, okay. Mm-hmm. They intervened, and they want to charge some of them, maybe.
I don't know if it was published what exactly they suspect, but there were papers saying that the reason for the investigation was public statements, which is I declare in an interview, for example, that I'm going to raise prices, or that I think that my rivals should raise prices. I think this should be under some scrutiny, because you just agreed with me that if they did so in a closed room, it would be a violation, right? So from the perspective of competition, it must be possible to attack this as a violation if they do this publicly, because it's the same effect. Instead of saying to you in a closed room, listen, let's raise prices, I say, I intend to raise prices. I know my rival is hearing me. And it might react by raising prices. So there must be a possibility to intervene.
Such a slippery slope, though.
I know, especially for somebody with an ideology like yours, it's a problem. But I say if we allow this, then that's the way they're going to fix prices in the future.
It's a slippery slope it's a watershed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a slippery slope on both sides.
So let's talk about real world examples. Like, what was your problem with Coca-Cola, for example?
Well, what Coca-Cola did was reach all kinds of arrangements with clients, like restaurants, kiosks, etc. Not to...
Like Microsoft.
It's sort of similar to the Microsoft case in a sense. If the restaurant or kiosk works with rivals like Pepsi, then Coca-Cola is going to eliminate all kinds of discounts, stop working with them, etc.
What's the problem with that?
The problem is, like you just said, a rival would want to exclude his smaller competitors in order to entrench his position. So Coca-Cola, as a monopoly, is not allowed to harm its rivals or interfere with the ability of its rivals to compete over all consumers.
But are they a monopoly?
But why?
Yeah, they're a monopoly.
I have to ask a question. Why does the restaurant care that Coca-Cola will will take away its products or make it unavailable? Because people want Coca-Cola because they're amazing, because it's like a drug, basically. It's kind of a drug. It is kind of a drug. But what I'm saying is they've gotten so good and they provide such a good product that otherwise, if it was, Shvichkenka, which is like, I don't know, some random Russian Coke I just made up that sucks, no one would, they'd be like, okay, you can take your Coke and go to hell. Like,
it might be amazing, but... and it's not forbidden to be amazing, but once you're amazing and because of this you're a dominant firm, there are rules that you must obey.
With great power.
Because, the premise is that if there's competition on the merits and we allow Pepsi and RC Cola, etc., to compete with Coca-Cola on the merits, that's better for consumers.
But isn't
because it induces Coca-Cola to reduce prices. It might enable Pepsi and RC Cola to be great themselves.
But it is they are competing. How are they not competing?
Sure. So, but it disturbs their ability to compete if you tell a restaurant, listen, you need me because I'm Coca-Cola. So if you work with them even a little bit, you're gonna suffer. I'm gonna make you suffer because you need me.
You don't.
That's a problem. That's not competition on the merits. If you say, listen, I'm offering you a better price, so I want to induce you to buy me, but I don't tell you don't buy him. You can buy him if you want, but my price is so low that you want to buy only me. That's fine. That's competition on the merits.
But what's the problem with exclusivity? Why can't Coca-Cola tell the restaurant, I want to be exclusive, isn't it?
It enables you to use your power in order to entrench your power. And then it harms competition. So it's the same sort of rationale that we had before. We want free competition in the market, and we know that the firms are going to do stuff in order to harm this competitive process. So our intervention, it consists of forbidding these firms from harming the competitive process.
I think telling Coca-Cola not to do it is harming the competitive process because first of all, if they weren't you say the state defined them as a monopoly, which is also a topic we need to talk about but if they weren't a monopoly, were they allowed to do this act? Like if I start a small cola company, I call it Naol Cola. Okay, and I go to Eitan's kiosk.
You need a serious branding.
I'm putting real Coke inside.
Okay.
And I go to Eitan. Yeah, I'm going to Eitan's kiosk, and I'm like, okay, you want my amazing Coca-Cola?
No.
Then take out all the other. Am I allowed to do it as a non-monopoly, as a new company?
You might be, if it doesn't. If it allows them to compete on the merits, that is, the kiosk doesn't really need you, and it might tell you, listen, if that's your term, then I don't want you. So the other guy might gain its business, etc. So this sort of so-called vertical agreement of exclusivity, for example, when you're a small company and you try to stimulate exclusivity from a buyer, that could be legal. Because these are cases where it depends. It depends on the circumstances. It might not harm competition. It might even be pro-competitive that you're doing this in order to give you some sort of push in the market. But if you're a dominant firm and you do this, then it's
so what's my incentive?
Well, your incentive is that if you gain a market share of 90%, like Coca-Cola, then you make a lot of money, and you can charge. There's also an issue of excessive pricing that's also forbidden in Israel, and there was a big case in the Supreme Court
Again, so what's my incentive?
But still, you can charge your cost plus, say, 20%, which is nice. You know, that's your incentive.
You, the state, will tell me how much to charge.
If you prove to the court that you would not have invested if you wouldn't be able to charge this price, etc. If you have some sort of investment justification for your price, you can claim this in court.
But if I can if I can charge 50% over,
can't.
No, I'm saying if I was able to create a product and sell it, and someone would be willing to pay me 50% more than what I spent, that's illegal in Israel?
In my view, if you're a dominant firm, then you're not allowed to charge so-called excessive price.
If you're a dominant firm.
Yeah.
Meaning if you control 90% of the market.
For example.
Okay.
But when you say 90% of the market...
Not okay, like I agree, but...
You agree with the facts.
It's less bad than what I thought.
But it's not that Coca-Cola... It's because Coca-Cola is owned... There are two big companies, right? Tempo and the drinking, right? There are two big drink companies.
There are three.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say 90%, you mean that out of the cola drinks, Coca-Cola was 90%. Not that of all drinks, Coca-Cola was 90%.
That's, again, a question of market definition.
Exactly.
So
but they invent
I think you would admit that you don't see Sprite as a substitute to Coca-Cola.
Right? And Pepsi?
No, I mean...
why not? It's all drinks.
That's not
soft drinks.
Dark and bubbly.
Soft drinks are like drinks.
Yeah, but most people would say, I want a Coke. So maybe They
don't see Pepsi. Those people don't see Pepsi as a substitute.
So maybe Coca-Cola is the market. And then Pepsi and RC are not even competitors. That could be. But...
RC, wow.
But for sure, you wouldn't say that water or just club soda...
Why not? Why not?
Because most people would say this is not interchangeable.
Where do you
Coca-Cola.
draw the line? Then a hamburger is a Coke.
Yeah.
No, but seriously.
Don't be ridiculous. No, but really, I mean, you have to draw, at some point, you have to draw the market. But I do agree with Noel in the sense that, I mean, it's arbitrary where I draw it. I mean, I could say drinks, I could say dark bubbly drinks, and I could say Coke, in which case... Pepsi, Coke, if you ask me, they're thieves.
You mean it's expensive?
No, like they stole the idea.
Oh, I see.
They stole the idea. I'm also from Atlanta, Georgia, the birthplace of Coca-Cola. So I have strong sentiments.
But you see the point when you say...
But it could be rigorous. Many antitrust authorities say if Coca-Cola, for example, is able to raise prices above the competitive price or above cost by 5 to 10%, without too many people going to Pepsi and RC Cola, then Coca-Cola is the market. And this is a very stringent test.
No, but there is a price above above it. People will go to Pepsi.
Because look at Apple.
Yeah, but currently the price of Coca-Cola is 47% above Pepsi and RC.
Okay.
And still Coca-Cola has 90%.
Because they're better.
Yeah, but in my view, at least, Coca-Cola should be forbidden from charging such a margin.
But why? Why not let the free market?
Because it's the same rationale like we talked before. So,
but here there
for
is
example, if I convinced you guys that had there been two Coca-Cola companies producing the great drink, and now they fix prices, is that a violation?
No.
Well, I'm talking to Chicago people, but they, most people would say this is a violation.
But let's stay in this.
And if one of them would merge with the other one and they would raise prices, it would be blocked. And if one of them is dominant and excludes the other one from the market, it's going to be attacked as a violation. Why? Because we want the competitive process to bring prices down to competitive levels. So now we have a situation where it so happened that we have just one Coca-Cola company, and it simply unilaterally did this bad thing that we're trying to prevent by creating a competitive process, raised prices by 47% above Pepsi and RC Cola. So in my view, if antitrust is consistent, it has to forbid this as well.
But Coca-Cola is not it's one drink. It's not a Coca-Cola company. You know what I'm saying? It's just
same
one
with
drink.
the merger, price fixing. All of my examples
McDonald's
before
is not
were about a drink.
McDonald's
if
is
they
not
were-
a McDonald's company. It's a hamburger. It's a fast food company, right?
So what's your point?
Because you said Coca-Cola is a cola. You said like if the Coca-Cola is one drink out of many, many, many drinks, and half of those drinks are owned by another company. So saying Coca-Cola is 90% of the market, to me, it's just
No, but
absurd.
that's going back to the market definition question.
Yeah, I'm back into market definition.
So we
Let's
agreed
define
before
McDonald's,
that we
sorry,
defined the market
yeah.
from the point of view of the consumer. And you as a consumer does not see water or club soda or
Says who?
orangeada.
Says
No,
who?
but if
Most consumers don't see
Says
those
who?
as substitutes.
Says who? Why not?
It's an
Fanta, you
empirical
have iced tea.
question.
Sorry.
If the answer to this empirical question is like you say,
Yeah.
I'm not worried. People can, and then Coca-Cola would not be able to raise prices by 47% above Pepsi and RC Cola because people would just drink water instead. But
yeah,
from the very fact that they're able to charge such a high price, I know that most people don't see even Pepsi and RC Cola as such a good substitute.
Because the threshold maybe hasn't been met yet.
there's still
And
a
47% is much more than 5 to 10% that most antitrust agencies consider as the benchmark for defining the relevant market.
Wait, I want to go back to that for a second. You're
We don't
saying,
have much time left.
Yeah, I know. We're about to have to leave our equipment here.
Yeah.
but you said 5%. If I can raise my prices by 5 to 10% and not see dropping,
Too many people,
leaving,
running away, and so this is
Then-
profitable for you, then the market is the one we thought. So, we start from the most narrow market. In this example, the Coca-Cola market.
so Coca-Cola is the
Might
market.
be a market. Yeah, maybe Coca-Cola has 100% of the relevant market.
In which
Obviously,
case, what would be the
Coca-Cola-
solution in your eyes to break Coca-Cola up?
So the solution
Coca-Cola.
here is exactly what the court tried to do. Say, okay, you're a monopoly, but you're not allowed to charge an excessive price. You have to mimic competition. You have to behave as if there is some competition restraining you. We give you some margin, because we don't want to tell you, charge exactly your cost. That's ridiculous. But take your cost, add 20%.
But do you know
That's
what they
fine.
spend their money on? Like, do you know how profitable they are? Do you know?
Well, I don't know, but in this case against them, one of the things
Yeah.
that Coca-Cola can do is say, listen, look at our cost. Look how much we spend on this, on that, on investment.
You're saying if they reinvest their money and then they show that they're not profitable beyond a certain point.
Yeah, that they're able to show that their profit isn't like it seems, because, for example, Pepsi and RC Cola invest much less, and that's why they're cheaper.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they might say, look, we are profitable, like Apple. We are profitable because we know that it makes we are profitable to this extent because we know it makes our shareholders happy. And that's how we've built that's how we've built this system. We're extremely profitable because we know this is how we
product.
operate well. I mean, it's
But the shareholders aren't the stakeholders that we have in mind here. We think about the consumers. So the shareholders are just somebody who shares this profit that antitrust law sees as excessive. Precisely because of all of these consumers that, for example, because of this price, do not buy.
Mm-hmm.
And antitrust law sees this as a pity.
I think we have to wrap it up because we brought sleeping bags, but I don't think you want us to sleep here.
I should ask my wife.
But to wrap it up, we have to ask you finally one question, which is, do you drink Coke?
No, I don't.
Okay, fair enough. Thank
Wow,
you so
it
much.
was
Really, really
very
interesting.
My
Really.
pleasure.
Thank you so much
For me too.
hosting us. Anything like are you in social media? Are you?
No, not really.
Do you have a website people can read like a study of yours?
Well, sure. And in Tel Aviv University, you can find my link in the law faculty's website, and all of my papers are there.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Okay, guys, thanks for listening.
Thank
See
you
on the
so
next
much,
one.
Professor Gilo. Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you.